This lab, we're going to look at 5-minute code, lab 6D, creating a box. We could create simple print statements and print out these lines that we have and actually create a box. But instead, we're going to utilize a nested for loop along with if, elif, else statements. Let's take a look at the objectives. So we're going to create a 10 by 5 box. The outside is going to track the rows. The inside is going to track the columns. So we have two loops. We're going to utilize an if, elif, else statement to track of what's going to be printed. The top and bottom rows will utilize dashes, and the verticals will utilize this pica symbol. Now, in order for you to do this, the easiest thing to do is look at the processes or the steps that we're going to take, write them out, and also take a look how a flowchart would work. So we're going to create some pseudocode, and that's basically an outline of the procedures that need to happen, which is kind of closely going to resemble the code, but not exactly. It'll give us a structure. So if you think about what needs to be done, is the first row needs to be all dashed symbols, and the last row is also going to need dash symbols, and the box in the middle, we need vertical and then a whole bunch of spaces and then another vertical. So we need to initialize the height. Now right now we'll just utilize variables, and later on we'll update the program for a user prompted input. So the first thing we're going to do is for each row we're going to have a range of 0 to height minus 1, because we're going to be utilizing the range function. So when we start out with 0 and also the height minus 1, so the top and bottom is what is being acknowledged here. Next thing we're going to look at is for each column, I'm going to utilize a variable called j, and again I'm going to be utilizing a range, and this j variable is going to keep track of the columns in terms of the position that we're in. When we're doing the first line, again it's all dotted lines. When it gets to the second line, we're going to do a vertical, a whole bunch of spaces, and then another vertical. All right, so we're going to basically check to see if I is equal to 0 or I is equal to height minus 1. So we're doing a system check. Either of those conditions, then we're going to print a dashed line. If not, we're going to continue on with the next check. J now is in position 0, or J is the last position. If that is the case, then we're going to print this vertical line. Otherwise, we're going to print a space. If all that is complete, then we're going to create a new line. Let's take a look at the flowchart and understand how this is going to work. So we're going to have a outside loop and an inside loop. For I in range for height, that is going to be keeping track of the rows. If that is a certain condition, then we're going to look at the columns in terms of the width. If I is 0 or height minus 1, basically if I is the top or the bottom, then we're going to print this dash line, and that's going to continue on until we get to the end of the line in terms of the width. Else, if then J, right, we're looking at the vertical column, is now at 0 point, or J is at the width minus 1, we'll print a vertical line. Otherwise, we'll print a space. And then it loops around until we get to the next statement where we get the end of the line, and then we'll print a return. So now we go to the next line. And the loop basically continues on. Once it's completed, then it'll print that the process is done. Now let's take a look at the code and how that is going to work. I've set up your template already. We have already established the height and the width of the box. And we're going to start right here with our code. And our first line is going to be something along the lines of using this statement. For I in range for height. Again, this is keeping track of our rows. And this is our outer loop. Next, we're going to write our inner loop, which for j in range is width. We're going to check the condition if I is 0, meaning at the top, or if it's at the bottom. If that condition is true, then we'll print the horizontal line. If that isn't true, we're going to do another conditional check to see if j is at the first position of the column or at the last position in the column. If that is the case, then we'll print the vertical line. And if none of that meets, we'll have a else statement. And in that else statement, what we're going to do then is simply print a space. And next we need to print out a new line. And that is going to be indented right here. The information in this for loop, all this is part of that. For this for loop, this is going to be everything there. So now let's go ahead and run our code. And now we have our box. If we actually take a look at the guide, we have our code visualizer so we could see the process and step through all the code. So I'm going to click on edit code to get a different screen, make it a little bit wider, and down below we're going to visualize what's going to happen, and it's going to step through the process. So the first couple things, we have our messages. Here you're kind of getting an idea what the purpose is of the functions, and now we're getting into the print statements, which is printing the header. Next, we're identifying the width and height variables, so you could see how these components are identifying what's going on in the visualizer. And now we're starting our loop. So again, this is our outside loop, this is our inside loop, and these are going to be the conditions. We'll click on next. Notice that I is 0, j is 0. So now it's going to print the dashed line. You see the dashed line that's up here, and then it's going to continue on. Notice that j has incremented to the next row, and we print another dashed line, and it's going to continue on until we get up to, fast forward a little bit, value 8. Remember, the ranges are one less, so watch what happens. Click on next. We're at 9. It printed out one more line. It gets down to here because we're all done with the inner loop. This statement is going to move and create a return. So we're on line number 2, and now it's going to check to see what position we're at with j, and then it's going to print out that vertical line. Now it's going to print out a whole bunch of spaces until we get to our 9th position, which then pay attention what happens with this code and over here to print out the vertical line. And there's the vertical line. Now that means we're at the end of our inner loop. We're going to print then a new line, and the process incremented. So right now we're going to be on It says I2, so technically now we're at row number 3, because again it started out with 0, and here is our third row that we're starting, and it'll continue on until it all goes through. So that's the code visualizer of identifying how things are done with a particular loop. All right, and that is it for this particular lab.